Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, DebatePhysics.com, also video presentation. So, side projects. I have tried to contact them in the past, no avail, blah blah blah. It's usual bullshit. So we're just looking for somebody to make some sort of counter argument. We can't find a single physicist willing to engage in any debate, argument, Sometimes it's not going to be all that friendly. Who cares? Not very important, really. It's really about the arguments, and the fact is that you have to defeat these arguments. This is the test. Your physics is being tested, and it's failing dismally, and you have to come to its rescue and explain how there's some explanation for the bullshit and the nonsense and the dishonesty and all of that. And they won't do it. They won't show up and provide an argument countering what I'm actually saying. Instead, they'll just say F equals ma, some other crap, and say, there, isn't that enough of an answer? No, it's not even close. So this guy, I guess it's just theater. He just makes these videos for money, blah, blah, blah. Do some Wikipedia research, take a subject, spiel some crap, and that's all it is to this guy, really. It's not really about the science or understanding anything in any substantially meaningful way. It's just all fodder for talk. So this one was titled 5 Things You Don't Understand About Gravity. So sort of implying that he was going to give us some insight. Now there's no insight anywhere in here. There's no, it's just this, it's the standard model bullshit, nothing, no surprises at all, no innovative points of view, nothing. Just the standard relativity crapola, gravitational wave crapola, again, quoting Einstein, who said you wouldn't see the damn things. What's the point of saying this wasn't Einstein's idea? Einstein didn't invent gravitational waves. It was talked about by other people. There was a conversation about it. Einstein chimed in. That's all Einstein did. He didn't do anything more. And he chimed in by saying, basically, you'll have gravitational waves, but they'll be so slight you won't be able to detect them. Ever. And so they don't do they never tell the story accurately. Leibnizian mathematics that says it takes 25 times the fuel to spin a motor 5 times as fast, and it of course doesn't. So you just propagandize the lie, and you call that science, and it's religion. This is just a preacher. He's pretending to be saying something meaningful, and all he's doing is quoting scripture. And it doesn't have anything to do with reality. And it doesn't have anything to do with what the evidence, the experiments they've actually have done and the ones they haven't done, and more importantly, all the millions of experiments, the simple $4 experiments they haven't done. Like dropping 4 pounds 1 foot and 1 pound 4 feet and seeing if they really have the same amount of energy when they hit the ground. So it's just so bad. I didn't think smart people were this dishonest, lying scum. I mean, they're just cowards, talk shit, and are decided to just hide from any kind of accountability. It just shows so little character. And it disappoints me because my theory is that intelligence is what makes people good people, and they're just proving it doesn't have a damn thing to do with it. You can be plenty smart and be an asshole, and that's just a sad and tragic fucking truth. And I'm very disappointed. Yeah, that's all I can say. I'm very disappointed. Alright, so maybe I'll just draw a real quickie here. So what I have come to realize, it seems so obvious in hindsight, like why didn't anybody else figure this out? So you have a mass in space, and it can be really any size, and the same phenomenon is going to take place. It's just going to be less obvious and extreme. And the fact is gravity means that every single little atomic bit of stuff that the thing is made out of still has gravity, okay? Sitting on the surface still has gravity. So obviously the impact stuff, the stuff that was going this way and ended up crashing into the Earth with some gravitational potential, some energy created by the pull of the Earth. So there's some vector of impact. So obviously there's some impact energy completely created by the Earth's gravity. So, and it's impact energy. When the meteorite hits, it had its own energy from space. It was already moving fast, and the Earth's gravity made it move a little faster. Just a fact. And so that is free energy, right? Because there's no accounting for it. But on top of that, when all of those little bits of matter are sitting on the surface, just like you, they're pushing in a direction, okay? Aggressively pushing in a direction. And they're all pointing in the same direction, which is the center of the Earth. And energy, unlike the, kind of childish and immature perception that somehow you can cancel energy, when they know now the whole Descartesian thing is true. The energy can never cancel. You just follow where it is, okay? Even Feynman went through a whole 10-minute storytelling just to emphasize the point that you have to conserve it. You can't just make it disappear. It's always in the system somewhere, the blobs of energy. So you have a ton of energy heading for the center of the Earth, and the Earth's center is speculated to be something like, 4,000 degrees centigrade, 4,000 degrees. Not a cold place, very hot. And all this stuff is melted. The substance of the Earth is molten, okay? So a ton of heat, and all of it created by gravity, frankly. So it's the pressure of the mass all moving to the same location and having a tug of war, where the energy pushing in one direction is opposing the energy in the other direction, and it's causing a lot of this. And that's the nature of jitter, is the nature of heat. And it's heat because it's actually forces, okay, moving matter. And every time a bit of force is pushing a piece of matter, it's a significant event in the universe, okay? It's part of the argument. But it's clearly occupying a force. The object contains it, the force bit is pushing it, blah, blah, however you want to look at it. But it's real energy, and you have to account for it. And so it has to be leaking out of the Earth at the same rate that it went in, so you have some kind of sense of equilibrium. And the real key is that the stuff that goes in takes time to get out the other side, and that's gravity. Gravity is just the fact that the energy hitting you from above isn't obstructed by an Earth. There's no Earth above you. So the energy has a clear hit, smack, hits you, and that energy, that heat, okay, that radiant force from the universe pushes you down. And the fact is the other side, okay, the other side doesn't have a compensating force. See, there's the force. And the other side over here, see, this force has to go through the whole Earth to get to you, okay, standing here, let's say. And that's the difference. It's just time. It takes more time to get through the Earth and get out the other side than it does for the force just to hit you in the head. And that's the differential you're falling in and constantly being pushed by. Constantly being pushed by. And everything's doing that. Every piece of mass is doing that. And it's just making the Earth hot. It's melting it. And it's causing it to radiate, okay, a temperature, an average temperature that who knows what it is. But in Kelvin, it might be 200 degrees, which might be, 70 below zero in Celsius. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is there's an understanding of an absolute scale of temperature, and anything that has any positive temperature is real temperature. So if you're going from 273 degrees Celsius, which is 0 degrees Kelvin, and you raise it 1 degree Celsius, we already know that that's a certain amount of energy it takes just to raise the temperature of a cup of water. That, you have to put in a certain number of joules to do that. Well, just imagine how much energy it takes to make the Earth you know, go from 273 minus 273 degrees Celsius to, say, 70 degrees Celsius. Huge amount of energy, gigantic amount of energy. So all this energy has been created into the universe. It's all flying out of the earth. All the other celestial bodies are also excreting a tremendous amount of heat, okay, radiant force. And the fact is, yeah, their force pushes me into the earth, and our force pushes them into their planet. The fact is all that heat moving through the universe, all that radiation, is causing gravity. Simple explanation. It's a very complete picture. What you radiate ends up pushing some other planet, okay, and then that planet radiates, and that radiation pushes you into this planet. There's a nice clean cycle. Bent space, no cycle. Bent space isn't a mechanism, it isn't a force, it isn't energy. And so you have a thing that doesn't have any energy causing real particle style type radiant energy. It's causing real motion. And the thing that doesn't have any motion, doesn't have any energy, doesn't have any capacity to absorb energy, is producing energy. Remember, you can't see the flaw in their bent space logic? That you can't put those facts together and make any sense out of it because there's no mechanism to take the heat radiating from objects in space and convert it into something called the bent space. You can't consume it in some way and make bent space out of it. So it's a complete paradox. It completely breaks any notion that there's anything called a bent space, let alone a bent space-time, which is even more insipid. Okay, silly. It's just silly. And you know, the fact people fall for this crap, just amazing. All right. So it's a pretty simple proof, in my opinion, of the complete failure of the concept. The concept fails entirely because they should have figured out right from the start, oh, we're saying a nothing, a bent nothing, is making energy. And then we have no explanation for how the energy gets back into the bent nothing. All right. So we'll play this piece of crap.
What goes up must come down.
Probably more volume than we need, so tone it down a hair.
Gravity doesn't need an introduction. It's the familiar force that keeps our feet on the ground and our Earth locked in a stable orbit around the sun.
So he has that little, you know, whatever it is, charisma kind of talk. He talks fast, talks, you know, blah, 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 nice little script, blah, blah, blah. But it's all bullshit.
But the mechanisms behind gravity are far more complicated than meets the eye.
So there's no mechanism. Let's just understand. So they can say, oh, the mechanism behind gravity. There's no mechanism. There's just some dopey notion that somehow space causes mass to warp space in some bizarre way where it creates a convergence where just the opposite of sunlight is as if the sun is pulling, sucking on something, an ether. I mean, they have nothing. They don't tell you what it is, but that's exactly how it's behaving. It's exactly the opposite of photons radiating from the sun. Gravity's just doing exactly, obeying exactly the same inverse square rules, behaving exactly the same, just the direction is reversed.
What are the days when we believed that an apple falling onto Newton's head represented just about everything there was to unpack about this invisible aspect?
So yeah, I mean, there is something to unpack, you know, in just understanding that, yes, that was a good observation of Newton's, that, okay, the moon is falling. All right, just like the apple, and the difference is the moon is moving, and so that gave him the cannon off of a mountain idea, and the idea that yes, you can counter this falling by just going fast in a direction
of our universe. In today's video, we're going to break down 5 things about gravity that are often oversimplified, commonly misunderstood by the public, or even still remain just a total mystery.
So, you know, none of this makes any sense because he's just going to talk standard jargon about the standard crappy explanations that aren't in depth at all. It's not exactly a force. It's not a force. There's no explanation for what it is. It has nothing in common with any notion of what we consider to be forces, like the radiation that creates photons, and even they've already conceded the decay products are electrons and protons.
It's common
Moving, and they're moving for a reason. They had to take the energy from something. You can't have energy for free. You have to take it from something that has it. The only way the Earth has motion is somewhere in its previous existence it had to take energy from something else. Something else hit it, stopped going the speed it was going, and shared its mass with the Earth, and therefore gave the Earth an increase in its velocity. You have to take the force.
taught that all interactions in the universe can be explained by the four fundamental forces.
So this is the silly part. These aren't forces, okay? I mean, the strong interaction is, again, it's so simple. I take a south side magnet, all right, here. Got the south side here. And then I just smash a north in here, and I smash another north on the other side of it, and I have two north magnets really close to each other. So it's the same thing as saying, okay, I have two protons and I want them close together. How do I do it? I just stick the opposite charge in between, right? So I just put an electron between two protons, and I'll get the protons really close to each other. And if I knock that electron out, then I have two protons really close to each other, and they're going to have a tremendous impetus to fly apart at a high velocity. That's the strong interaction. The strong interaction is a charge interaction, obviously. It's simply explained as charge. And then the electromagnetic force is the force at a period, okay, at a frequency. You already know that. And they don't have magnetism in here, right? There is no weak interaction. That's just nonsense. And then they have gravity here, but they don't consider it a force, so why bother?
These are the strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism, and gravity. However, you'll sometimes see these listed under a slightly different name, the four fundamental interactions, which is often considered to be slightly more accurate because gravity isn't exactly a force like the other three.
So he says, isn't exactly a force. It's not exactly anything. It's spooky action. I mean, it's just so ironic that Einstein is the founder of a theory that is as spooky as the quantum mechanical entanglement he griped about. It's action without a mechanism. He didn't fix Newton's problem. He didn't answer Newton's problem. What causes gravity? Bent space is a silly answer. I mean, Newton couldn't give you a silly answer. He could have given you a silly answer. Gremlins do it, or angels do it. But he was a better scientist than that.
To explain this idea, we need to start from the beginning. For over 200 years, the prevailing theory of gravity had been laid out by Isaac Newton.
So again, Isaac Newton didn't have a theory of gravity. It's not a very flattering picture of Newton, by the way. But anyway, whatever.
In Newtonian gravity, the attraction between two objects is described as an equal and opposite pull that can be calculated based on the object's masses and relative distance.
So this idea that it's a pull, again, is just... So Newton did know about particle gravity, all right, and again, and the drag problem was still the drag problem, but that's because he didn't know about electrons and protons, and he didn't know that electrons and protons are in fact dragged. The fact is you can't shoot electrons to the moon. You can't shoot protons to the moon. Even though there's a vacuum and you should be able to do it, you can't do it.
The Earth pulls on you, keeping you tethered to the ground, and likewise, you pull on the Earth. It's just that you've got a lot...
So there's no pulling, there's just an absence of push. So you've, just like in charges, somehow you negate the positive charge repulsion by sticking a negative charge between it, just as you negate the magnetic attraction problems by putting the... So you have two things that repel each other. Again, the magnet demonstrates. All I have to do is put the south side between the two north sides, and I've negated whatever the force was. So you already have clear examples of how the force can be negated.
Less mass.
The push is just taking away, another push, negating the push from the other side.
So that you don't visibly move the Earth, but maybe your mum does. This model worked wonders. It was easy to understand and experimentally verified.
So again, there's no model, okay? He had no explanation. He says, I feign no pretense that I have the solution to this problem of explaining the mechanism. He didn't pretend to know what the explanation was. And what he did say was, it would be silly of me to think it's just spooky action. That stuff's just motivated without any physical mechanism causing it. So he was kind of mocking the idea of bent space. And that's the joke here is, he's mocking the idea that some magical thing just happens to make things do this movement thing. That the movement thing has to be created by a force that's causing the motion.
However, even Newton himself was a bit troubled with one part. You see, he figured out how to measure and predict gravitational attraction, but he still had absolutely no clue what caused it or how this action could occur.
And you still have no clue. So, bent space answers no questions. There's just no answer in there. Newton knew about the inverse square law. He knew it's a convergence. So there's nothing. Bent space doesn't answer any of the questions about, well, how does it happen? How do you give things energy and cause them to move? How does gravity give objects momentum? And that's what they have. You have momentum into the earth. You can measure it on a scale. You can measure the momentum. It's real momentum. I make this scale do this. I can do the same thing this way. You have to have a momentum to cause the scale to move, and then you have to have a constant momentum, a constant ability to keep applying your force to keep it there. Well, if you're keeping it there here, it's the same thing. You didn't just bounce into the earth and cause it to bounce. No, you bounced and you continue to push on it. You continue to run. You continue to apply a real force, a real momentum. I have to explain this to scientists. Jesus Christ. This is so bad. So bad.
Over such large distances. In a letter to Richard Bentley, he wrote, "That one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum without the mediation of anything else, by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one another."
Right. So without a force. So he's making it clear. Okay? That's an absurdity. There has to be some kind of mechanism that's causing the effect. There has to be something actually pushing things. Because pulling would be silly.
Is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophic matters a competent...
Apparently, all men with some competency are able to fall for it. So he was totally wrong, okay? He didn't meet Barnum yet and didn't figure out that all the people can be fooled all of the time. That they'll fall for anything. Go ahead, make up a fucking silly story, and as long as you're wearing the right suit and have the right badges, they'll believe it.
Faculty of thinking could ever fall into it. The frustration would be shared by scientists around the world until it was finally resolved by...
So it's just such a joke. Resolved with nothing. No mechanical mechanism. Nothing. You just say it magically gained momentum. The thing is moving this way. It doesn't have any momentum that way. All of a sudden it goes by a gravitational body and it gains momentum in that direction. It gains real energy, real motion, real mass moving energy. And you don't account for it at all. It's for free. It's the biggest free energy mechanism in the universe, obviously. It's creating tons and tons of free energy. And these idiots then will tell you there's some law of thermodynamics that says, oh, the universe is going to run out of energy. Well, how the hell could it run out of energy when gravity's creating this insane amount of it constantly?
None other than Einstein. In his theory of general relativity, Einstein revolutionized our understanding of...
No, he said nothing. He didn't revolutionize anyone's understanding. He just said a bunch of gibberish, okay, unaccountable gibberish that just basically says this is a redrawing of the inverse square law. And it doesn't redraw it in any kind of rational way. this picture isn't reasonable. You know, and again, you wouldn't use this nonsense. I mean, photons are doing exactly the same thing in exactly the opposite geometry. So instead of going out, instead of going in, they're going out. And you could draw exactly the same picture, you know, with a bulging cube, and say that's what's causing photons. But you know better, because you know what's causing the photons is the insane amount of heat. And the fact is you're releasing a bunch of particles that are flying out of the sun.
Of gravity by showing that it isn't actually a force acting between two objects, but rather it is a byproduct of the way mass distorts space-time.
Right, so somehow mass distorting space-time gives it momentum. It gives the object free energy, free momentum, free motion towards the Earth. And when it hits the Earth, it continues to push into the center of the Earth, aggressively, constantly pushing and pushing and pushing towards the center of the Earth. Tons and tons and tons of free energy that have melted the center of the Earth. So much energy, you melted the Earth. Fact. Will somebody provide the counter argument that that's not how it works? That all of these combined masses doing this constant momentum, this constant pushing into the Earth isn't what's making the Earth hot?
As you might have learned in a physics class, an object in motion stays in motion unless it's acted upon. This means
that gravity gives things free motion. The soccer ball doesn't move at all unless there's the gravity. So if I put it in space, it doesn't move. I bring a gravitational mass near it, all of a sudden it's moving. All right, and it starts accelerating faster and faster, gaining more and more energy. And you have nothing to account for it. You have no mechanism, and you have no explanation for how your energy is conserved. Where's your conservation theory? Oh, that's right, you don't have one.
if you are cruising through a vacuum in space, your speed and direction would remain unchanged until something affected you. Newton was spot on when he came up with this idea. Then Einstein...
So again, yes, Newton was spot on, and Einstein completely broke the theory and basically said, no, you don't need to have conservation. I can create free energy, and you're all too stupid to figure out that that's what I just did. And I admit that their propaganda is so strong. You know, they ingrain this crap in you that they have some authority, that they have spent some time analyzing all this. They have all these formulas and all this stuff, and they have so much noise going on that, yeah, it distracts you from a simple truth this obvious. That Einstein's theory, 100 years now, they've had this stupid theory, and it's been always a free energy theory. There's no other way to look at it. It's obviously a huge source of free energy in the universe. It goes in, bent space pushes stuff in. The stuff that leaves is real energy. It's real particles. It's real rays. It's real radiation. It's real infrared radiation. It's real microwaves. It's real radiation. So nothing causes real radiation to fly out of the Earth. That's not a conservational theory. I just thought of another way to illustrate this. Look, if the sun disappeared, if we just turn it off, no photons coming out of the sun, Jupiter would still have a spot. It would still have an atmosphere moving. There'd be all kinds of heat, evidence of heat, lots of evidence of heat all over the place. So it's not getting its heat from the sun. It's not the little tiny amount of energy being spewed out by the sun's radiation that's causing the effect. The Earth isn't molten in the center, okay, because the sun is hitting it with photons. It has nothing to do with its real temperature. Its real temperature, okay, which is hundreds of degrees Kelvin on the surface, that is entirely created by gravity. And it just takes, as you you can understand that the real conflict is right there in the center of the Earth. That's where the pressure is the highest. That's where the heat is the highest. And the heat has to migrate out. And as it's migrating out, there's more and more mass it has to heat. So obviously its temperature goes down because the amount of stuff it's heating goes way the fuck up. Okay, but it's still hundreds of degrees Kelvin of real heat, real joules of energy, millions, trillions of joules of energy being created by this bent geodesic. And there's no evidence that there's any way to get the heat back into the bent geodesic. The heat doesn't die and go into a bent geodesic. There's no mechanism. None. Zero.
Builds upon it to explain his new understanding of gravity. In a Newtonian model, your path through space would be a straight line, and this straight line would be bent by gravity.
Right. So, and we know everything does travel the straight line. So again, it's just more nonsense that somehow theoretically there's a bent geodesic somewhere, but there's no evidence that this bent geodesic actually bends anything.
Gravitational attraction curving your path toward the object as you are pulled in its direction. What Einstein did is he showed that it isn't really your path through space that is curved, but rather space itself. And this may seem like a pointless distinction to make.
Yeah, it is pointless because you can't draw it as anything other than straight line vectors. Just like the rays of light coming out of the sun are straight line vectors. Okay, there's no way to draw your convergence in any other way than straight line force going into the Earth. And that's exactly how Leonard Susskind teaches it. He uses water, okay, as an analogy, and basically turns the pump on and pumps the water from the center of the gravitational body to the outside. And it's exactly the same thing as any other radiation, and there's no evidence that anything travels a curved line to gain its velocity. Because the real point is it is a convergence. You are basically just pushing. I have any dense, I make a box and I put a bunch of BBs in it bouncing off the sides of the box. So I have the same amount of energy in there. And I put two objects in the box. They will be pushed into each other. They will shadow each other. They will crash into each other. Inevitable. And if I just put one of them in there and it has some kind of capacity to be compressed, it will be compressed by the amount of pressure it's being hit by. And that's exactly the universe we're in. We're in a universe full of radiation, just tons and tons of radiation coming from all directions constantly. And the simple logic is the radiation coming through the Earth is way behind the radiation that didn't go through the Earth. Is that too complicated a theory? No, I don't think it is.
But it's actually really rather important. Mass bends and stretches space-time, and as a consequence, what you perceive as a straight path is curved along this warped terrain.
I mean, just understand, because bent space is a nothing, because it's a hobgoblin theory, it doesn't have any side effects. So you can't make some argument, well, what about drag, and what about this, and what? Because it doesn't have a mechanism. It's an invisible man, okay? It doesn't leave footprints, doesn't leave fingerprints somehow. It does all this magical stuff because it's not only an invisible man, but somehow it's a man with no mass,
moving you toward the attracting mass. This straight yet curved path is called a geodesic.
It's a pile of nonsense. So again, drawing gravity, illustrating gravity using a gravity model. The bent hole, the well that you fall in because gravity pushes you down. I mean, it's just so illogical, and it's not the truth. It happens in 3 dimensions. Quit drawing it in 2 dimensions. It's a 3-dimensional process, and the 3-dimensional process is basically a bunch of straight line vectors going right to the center of the Earth.
And it's easier to understand.
And frankly, they don't all go to the center of the Earth. There's a ton of gravity going at all these other angles that never pass through the center of the Earth that are still pushing on you. There's force pushing me this way and force pushing me this way, both having a component down. I end up with the component down. These 2 components just, push me this way and that way. So they're not adding pressure down.
And with a comparison to passenger airlines, airplane.
And obviously the pressure has nowhere to go. You can just get it. I mean, it's just like a water wave. If a non-compressible liquid, you push this way, it can't go down. There's ground down there. That has more pressure. It already has maxed out the pressure forward, so it has to go up. Water wave. Duh. Not complicated.
Want you to take the shortest route to their destination, which is a straight line.
And again, to argue that they're not traveling, literal straight lines, that's because you're traveling around a round sphere. That doesn't explain gravity going in. They have to bend the line going in to the gravitational body. Here's the gravitational body. You're coming. This line has to be bent. Okay, that's the line they got to bend. Okay, flying across the surface, of course, it's a round surface. You have to travel around a palabra.
From the pilot's perspective, they indeed take off and fly straight with no deviation. However, when you zoom out, you can see that their overall path was actually curved because despite the surface of the Earth being two-dimensional, it curves into a third dimension.
What's the point of saying the surface of Earth is two-dimensional when it's clearly three-dimensional? But whatever, okay, no point.
On the surface of a sphere, and thus what they perceived as a straight line followed this curve. It's a bit harder to visualize this in 3 dimensions.
And again, that's not the well. Okay, flying across the surface of a round object is not the well thing. So again, just bullshit. The thing is not an analogy. The plane is not an analogy for this bending, the bent well.
Because we live in 3 dimensions ourselves, but the concept is similar. Objects travel in a straight line, guided by the curves of space-time. This gives the impression...
I can't believe people bought this. I mean, I had absolutely there was no moment, just like believing in God, that I could sit there and say, oh yeah, that sounds so plausible. Because it doesn't there's nothing to it. It's just telling me something. Okay, it's magically pulling. How the hell does it do that? How does it pull on something? What? You don't have it. You got to tell me how it's doing it. You can't just say, oh, it's a bent geodesic. What the hell is that? There has to be a mechanism. Nothing can move. Like Newton said, if something's sitting there, it ain't moving until you act on it with a force. You have to act on it with something. Something has to make it happen. And nothing can't make it happen. Nothing can't push something. So your damn bent space has to be something. And what the hell else is it then? Then ether. You're just redrawing the ether and calling it something else, calling it bent space-time, but it's really just ether redone. Ether 1.1.
That there is a mysterious force pulling a distant planet toward a heavy star, but in reality, there is no force, no invisible push or pull that is shoving the planet in a new direction. It is simply a consequence of the star's mass warping space-time.
Right, and the consequence is you gave something momentum. So you gave it real energy with a non-existent mechanism. And you're saying that's simple to understand. Everybody should get that. That's completely reasonable. Nothing created something. We made energy out of nothing. No mechanism.
And on a more advanced note, if we weren't there already, it's not just about mass. The distortion of space-time is actually created by any form of energy density.
So this is a pile of crap, okay? They have no evidence of this, okay? That energy density creates gravity. No evidence whatsoever. Nonsense. Electrons and protons create charge, okay? And the charge is made out of force interactions between them, and they all have to be accounted for, and it's all conservative. You can never eliminate a piece of energy out of the universe. It's either flying free in the universe, this little stuff up here, down there. It's either flying free or it's stuck to an electron and proton and it's moving it in a direction. Those are the only 2 ways force can be manifested in this universe. Now, I know that's me saying so, all right, but I'm telling you so, all right, and I'm telling you that every single piece of evidence indicates that's right. That creates conservation, and that explains how momentum controls the universe.
Which is why, even though photons are generally believed to have a rest mass of 0, they still...
So generally believed by who? Who made up this rule that somehow whatever a rest mass is, like a photon ever rests anyway, which is just idiotic on its face, that you could have something going the speed of light that's resting somewhere. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. Why would somebody, again, why would smart people sit there and say, well, that's a good enough sentence for me? Yeah, the thing that always moves the speed of light, it has a rest mass thingy. What the fuck? It's just so fucking stupid. Obviously, the photons carry momentum. It's obvious. They obviously are they're heating the surface of the earth. They're real things. They're cause real motion in matter. They hit matter and if it's absorbed, if the momentum is absorbed, the object moves. If it's reflected, it doesn't.
Interact with gravity, and you can even technically create a black hole out of enough radiation focused in a small region in space.
Oh, it's just bullshit. You could create a black hole out of energy. Absolutely zero evidence for any of this shit. Just talk. Just storytelling. The book of bullshit. The book of let's see how silly, how big a fool will the average human be. What kind of crap can we spew that they'll still believe it even though they see zero evidence for it? We'll just tell them it's the truth.
And really, what you've just heard is truly just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how curved space gives rise to
Tip of the dog poo.
gravity. We won't get into deeper details, but we will leave you with the best explanation of it all.
So this really has nothing to do with 5 things you don't understand about gravity. So what was in here? So what was the misunderstanding he corrected? Or what was the surprise fact? Now, this is just standard model bullshit.
Quote from legendary theoretical physicist John Archibald Wheeler, who simplified the whole concept in the single phrase, space-time tells matter.
So you could just change this to force tells matter how it's going to move by hitting it and interacting with it. And then matter tells the force where it's going to be excreted, where it's going to end up. So every time an electron moves into the field of force, the light, every time the electron moves into the light, it obviously concentrates the light. It takes stuff that's at a certain frequency and it blue shifts it. Every single time it pushes in, it creates higher densities of energy in the field. And every time it retracts, it does exactly the opposite. It creates a null. It creates an expansion of a weakening of the density of the force. So every time an electron moves, it changes the force. And every time the force acts, it changes the electron's position. And that's all there is. There's just the yin of the force and the yang of the matter.
Matter how to move, matter tells space-time how to curve. General relativity refines Newton's findings and provided us with our most accurate model of gravity to date. However,
So again, it's not a model. There's no model here. There's just the same exact facts that Newton knew about. Newton would have drawn you a picture of lines of force going right into the earth and say, yeah, that's pretty much what gravity's doing. Now, whether the lines are pulling or whether the lines are pushing, I don't know. But that's what he would have drawn, because that's how it acts exactly. That's the inverse square law. You can understand it. Gauss made it clear, and then Maxwell made it even clearer in terms of drawing charge with lines of force. And you just say, well, how many lines of force am I intersecting? Well, the number of lines of force tell you how strong the force is. Exactly the same diagram can be drawn for gravity. So it doesn't provide any new insight at all. It doesn't explain anything. It's just saying hobgoblins did it.
It is not perfect and has one glaring issue. Of the 4 fundamental interactions, gravity is the one that has yet to be reconciled with quantum mechanics.
Okay, so this idea of reconciling merely because, yes, one theory is conservational and accountable in the sense that there's no point in me even saying that because quantum mechanics has gotten so wooey. So they now turn energy into matter and matter into energy and do all kinds of weird, wacky shit. So I can't even say that anymore. But gluon, particle. It sticks to something and then it shoots a tube out and sticks to the other thing and then pulls it in like a frog. Yeah, no. I mean, you fall for that.
Put simply, relativity is used to describe larger objects and quantum mechanics is used to describe the universe.
Right, so there's only one universe. It's where the electrons and protons interact and the force. And that's the only universe that's the real universe. It doesn't get any more elemental than that. And technically, it doesn't get any bigger than that. Those are the only moving parts. Those parts decide what everything else does. So electrons and protons have to do stuff before I can do anything. It's all about force and the movement of electrons and protons. Everything is charge, in a sense. It requires a charge interaction to take place before anything else takes place. And it's just that we're in a really slow part of the universe. A piece of time is 1 second to us is a billion years, in terms of interactions that the electrons and protons will have. They'll have a billion years worth of interactions in their scale, in the time it takes us to have, speak a word.
Us on a subatomic level. So, when working in the domain of one, usually you can safely ignore the other because they describe such different aspects of the universe. However, there are times when we can't just ignore one of them and need both an understanding of quantum mechanics and gravity working together.
Both theories are garbage, frankly, and both of them are jump the evidence. Both of them are just, and they're silly. I mean, I don't, it doesn't, it's bad that you make up theories, but when you make up silly ones and people buy it, that's the part that's really disturbing.
To fully describe what's going on. This is the case in the highest levels of energy, such as the moments immediately following the Big Bang and near the smallest regions of space, such as near the singularity of a black hole. If we truly want to understand every aspect of the universe, these two will have...
So anyway, all of that you have to understand. Who cares if their math doesn't work, because you're making it up anyway. You don't have any black holes to do any analysis on. You don't have any fucking goddamn Big Bangs to analyze. So it's all just made up.
Eventually need to find common ground. This has led to the decades-long search for a more comprehensive theory of quantum gravity, or in other cases, a so-called theory of everything that unifies all...
So it's really disgusting you put those two things together, that unifying gravity would somehow be a theory of everything, when their theory of everything is, again, 400 different kinds of particles, all kinds of magical functions, ESP particles, all kinds of bizarre shit, frankly. And that doesn't happen in reality. So they're so far from a rational theory that has any hope of creating an evolving universe.
All domains, gravity included. Without getting into the specifics here, there have been many different models put forward over the years, such as loop quantum gravity, M-theory, string...
Yeah, put forward by who? So some authority, some bishop of science gets to invent nonsense, and everybody somehow pays attention, and why again, you believe this, whatever the fuck this thing is, that's something real? That crap is at the center of the universe? Oh, shit.
Theory, twister theory, and several others, but one problem that they all share is that
they're crazy and silly and stupid and complicated. They're not elemental. They're not fundamental. You're not describing this simple blueprint. It gets simpler and simpler, just as life gets simpler and simpler as you head towards its origin. Then it turns into chemistry, and the chemistry gets simpler and simpler. It all has a history that gets simpler and simpler, not more complicated. There's no battleships in the elemental universe. There's just rowboats.
Because they are all predicting results on these extremely high energy levels or tiny, tiny regions of space, they are next to impossible for us to verify.
So all of the accelerator experiments are nonsense because they're all based on assigning energy based on 1/2 mv squared, and that doesn't happen. it's not real energy. It can never be collected. It's never been collected ever in any experiment. So they say something has all this energy, it won't show up anywhere. It doesn't lift rockets off the ground. It doesn't land lunar modules on the moon. Kinetic energy is a nonsense. You can't collect it in a ballistic pendulum. The lever tells you it's a lie because levers and balances tell you what equals what, and the definition of what equals what is completely different. So you can't, none of that is real physics. Because it's all fake energy.
Verify with real-world experiments using current technology.
Oh, bullshit.
For example, loop quantum gravity
Oh, don't even use that as an example.
predicts that space-time is not continuous and smooth, but is actually made of distinct pieces or bits that can't be divided further. As a result, this theory makes the shocking prediction that the speed of light is not constant.
Which is silly. So again, what's the point of it, all right? I mean, how many ways have we tested? The speed of light's pretty reliable. And yeah, it's our capacity to measure it precisely, but I mean, to measure the fact that it's pretty much always the same. Yeah, it always comes out the same.
But rather varies ever so slightly depending on a photon's wavelength, with higher energy photons moving slightly slower.
So why even mention this? It's such a minor thing, and you can't debunk it because it's so tiny a difference, and who cares? If you're creating that tiny a difference, who cares?
However, this difference is so indescribably tiny that we really have no hope of detecting it.
So why would you worry about it then? If you can't detect it, it's such a tiny difference, why would it interfere in the theory at all? Who cares?
Likewise, for several predictions of string theory, our particle accelerators simply can't reach the levels of energy required to either prove or disprove the prediction. Still, that's not to say that these theories are simply numbers.
I mean, this whole idea that you're going to get levels of energy, what does that mean? Infinite temperature? Yeah, you can't create more pressure than the universe can create, frankly. That's why there's limits. The suns in the galaxies, there's a limit to how big the suns get. They can't get, bigger and bigger. There's a limit. And, the real universe has limits. You can't create infinite pressure. You can't create infinite heat. You can't create a lot of infinite things.
On a chalkboard. Even without experimental validity, they still have yielded interesting scientific and mathematical contributions. It's just that without observable evidence.
So whatever that is, some kind of nonsense. Well, lots of other wacky theories are helpful. So that's like some spiritual person saying, well, it's okay to have Catholics and Protestants, and then it's okay to have the tree god people and the shark god people, and it's all so interesting, isn't it? It's just so interesting. No, it's not at all. It's just evidence of how you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because you can't tell wrong answers from right answers.
They can't yet be solidified as accepted science. And as a result, there is no consensus in the scientific community concerning quantum gravity, and the field is currently developing at this very moment.
Yeah, so they just show a simulation of nothing. Again, the thing you have to do is make your gravity out of a real mechanism. It has to be accountable. So you first have to explain where it gets its calories, its capacity to push something, because that's what it's really doing. And if you're going to say it's pulling something, well, then you got to do your magical, it has this special capacity to create pulls. And you're still going to have to explain that it has to use energy to pull on something. It has to shoot its tongue out and stick the tongue to the thing and then pull the tongue in, whatever the mechanism is. Obviously, it's a push-averse, and this is all, it's just so bad. This is going to take longer than I thought it would, frankly. Because he talks fast and he says a lot of shit, and it's all shit.
It's certainly something to look out for in the coming decades as fresh ideas and
says you. Pompous douche says so.
Technological improvements increase our experimental capability.
We haven't done the simplest damn experiments. 10-ton train, 5-ton train. All right, 5 tons is going to go 10 miles an hour. 10 tons is going to go 5 miles an hour. Same momentum. But one of them has twice as much energy. This one has twice as much energy. So you do a tug of war. Which one wins? Oh, that's right. None of them win. It's a draw. Because it's the same power. It's the same capacity to do work. Because kinetic energy can't do work. Because it doesn't stinking exist. It's a fable. velocity squared is nonsense. It doesn't make any geometric sense. It can't make any mathematical sense.
And we finally might be able to crack the case for good.
Oh, brother, we might be able to do that with our nonsense foundations. No, you're not going to be able to see it from up your own ass.
And Harbor Freight.
Okay, well, it's probably a good enough time for a break. Maybe we'll call this a part 1. Yeah, maybe. I'll see if I'm in the mood.